Okay, fantastic. And let's see, I'm just going to have our Migrations Initiative share the screen with our slides. Thank you so much. Wonderful. So I wanted to begin this institute, this Migrations Initiative Pedagogy workshop, which is hosted by the Mario Einaudi Center for International Studies, by welcoming everyone to participate. Thank you so much for being here with us today. And I want to thank our two amazing and talented expert presenters who I'm going to let do a self-introduction as part of our pedagogy itself. So I'll turn it over to them very shortly, but I'm Riedl. I'm the director of the Einaudi Center for International Studies. And on behalf of Cornell University and our Migrations Initiative in particular, I want to give a very warm welcome to our many partners that we have joining us today from across the globe, many of our partners from our Global Hub institutions and from our community college partners across Central New York and our Cornell faculty and friends as well. So thank you everyone for being here. It's a great mix and we'll get to learn a little bit more about each other's projects and proposals, course modules and the like. And I'm sure we'll all benefit from knowing more about how we each approach the ideas here today in terms of reflective pedagogy. Before we get started, I want to start out with our land acknowledgement in that Cornell University is located on the traditional homelands of the Gayakono. The Gayakono are members of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, an alliance of 6 sovereign nations with a historic and contemporary presence on this land. The Confederacy precedes the establishment of Cornell University, New York State, and the United States of America. We acknowledge the painful history of Gayakono dispossession and honor the ongoing connection of Gayakono people, past and present, to these land and waters. So thank you very much. Now, I want to begin with self-introductions for all of us before we begin with Melina and Amy's as well. So what we're going to do, if our Migrations Initiative can just paste this in the chat as well, for those of you who are virtual, which I guess is everyone now, if you can put in the chat your name, your role with an affiliated organization, and then geographically, locationally, ideationally, where you're zooming in from today, we'll be able to see that. And then we're gonna go, I think we can take a minute to just go around our screens. And Ascari, if you can stop the share for a moment so we can see each other. I think we're at a good number for doing that. If we can go around our screens and we'll just let everyone do that themselves as well to share that information you've just put in the chat. So I'm going to start with the left of my screen with Christina.
Hi, I'm Christina. I'm the Global Education Coordinator at Monroe Community College in Rochester, New York.
Thanks, Christina. And to Joseph.
I'm Joseph Scanlon, Assistant Professor of Political Science, also Monroe Community College in Rochester.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for joining us, both of you. Justin.
Hi, my name is Justin Park. I'm from Cornell Law School, so I'm in Ithaca, New York.
Great. Welcome, Justin. Judith.
Hi, I'm Judy Byfield. I'm in the history department and at Cornell, and so I'm also in Ithaca.
Thanks, Judy. Great to see you. Ernesto.
Hi, I'm Ernesto Bassi. I work with Judy Byfield in the history department. I'm also the director of the Latin American and Caribbean Studies program here at Cornell, and I'm logging in from my home in Ithaca.
Welcome. Patricia.
Hi everyone, my name is Patricia Santa Cruz. I'm an English teacher at Unidad Educativa González Suárez here in Ecuador. And I'm interested in learning this program today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Patricia. Welcome. Beth.
Hi. Oh, is that going to work? Sorry about that. Hi, I'm Beth. I'm sitting next to Rachel, so we had to get the microphone right. I'm at the law school here in Ithaca. Hi, everybody.
Thanks, Beth. And Emma.
Hi, everyone. My name is Emma. I am at Tompkins Cortland Community College. I'm an ESL faculty there, and I'm currently in Ithaca, New York, but the community college is in Dryden, New York.
Welcome. Thanks for joining us. Derek.
Excuse me. Hi, I'm Derek Chang. I'm in the Department of History and the Asian American Studies program at Cornell, and I'm here in Ithaca from the basement of my house.
Glad you're here with us. Thank you, Derek. The second, Christina.
Hi, I'm Christina, and I teach anthropology at Tompkins Cortland Community College, and I'm logging in from Spafford, New York.
Wonderful. And Eleanor.
If that's Elena, that's me, and I carry a newborn in my arms right now, so it might be a little distracting. I'm a cultural anthropologist studying Roma and Romanian migration to France, and I'm currently a visiting assistant professor at the University of Akron, Ohio.
Thank you, Elena. Welcome. Eleanor Painter. Thanks, Eleanor. David?
David Flatten. I'm also at Tompkins Cortland Community College there in Dryden, and I'm zooming in from the wilds of Lansing.
Wonderful. Thank you, David. Estelle?
Hi, I am at Cornell Law School, and I am zooming in from the law school.
Great. You're here with one of your colleagues in person as well. And DeAndrea.
Good afternoon, everyone. DeAndrea Matthews. I am the Director of Diversity and Inclusion at the Detroit Zoological Society, previously with Wayne State University.
Thanks for joining us. Wonderful. Christy G.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Christine Gross, and I'm a student in adult education at Brock University in Canada, and I'm calling you from Windsor, Ontario, just across from Detroit.
Wonderful. Thanks for joining us. Audrey.
Hello, I'm Audrey Hudgens. I'm calling in from Seattle University in Seattle, Washington. I teach political science and international studies.
Fantastic. Thank you. And Kathy Peck.
Hi, I'm Kathy Colin Peck. I'm the post-secondary outreach coordinator at the Einaudi Center for International Studies, and I'm joining you from my office on campus in Ithaca, New York at Cornell University.
Wonderful. And Michelle?
Hi, I'm Michelle Whitecraft. I am a professor at Mansfield University in the education department, and I also teach at Tompkins Cortland Community College. I am the chemistry instructor there. Thank you.
Fantastic. I think I have everyone except for our very important panelists, Melina and Amy. Is that right? Did I miss anyone? Wonderful. So before we move, Kelsey.
Hi, folks. My name is Kelsey. I'm a history PhD candidate at Cornell,
and prison educator with the Cornell Prison Education Program. And I am at home in Ithaca and actually teaching this evening. So I'm quite excited to have this on my mind while I drive up to Auburn.
Thank you so much, Kelsey, for joining us. Glad you're here. Molly.
Sorry, I just put it in the chat because I figured we were moving forward, but my name is Molly O'Toole. I am a visiting journalist at Cornell this semester. Normally I'm working at the Los Angeles Times in Washington covering immigration. First time teaching this semester, so I'm very excited to be here. Thank you.
Glad you could join us, Molly. Sophia.
Hi, everyone. Yes, Sophia Videnas. I'm in the Department of Anthropology at Cornell, and I'm zooming in from my office here in Ithaca.
Thank you so much, Sophia. Glad you are all here. Before we move on, I want to take 1 minute for a reflection from each of us to jot down beside you or just think internally what you're hoping to get out of the session. So just if you can focus on that for a minute. And since we are on Zoom, you can go ahead and type it into the chat if you feel comfortable sharing your goals. Great. These are great. Thanks, everyone. You can keep popping them in there if you like. Wonderful. Yeah, some good suggestions here, ways of thinking about it. Okay, so thinking about inclusive and accessible practices, allyship, what really is reflective pedagogy, engaging with students with their ideas and knowledge, learning about others' lived experiences, and then some of weaving in the substantive focus of migration and law as well as an openness to different perspectives. Fantastic. So with that, I want to move to the self-introductions from Melina and Amy. And Asghari, can you share the screen again, please? Great. And then advance to the next slide. Great. So we're going to be working on these strategies for inclusive and reflective pedagogy and design, and then we'll be using a visual mapping strategy to build out, to think about reciprocal community partnerships. Those are some of our strategies for today, and then you can advance to the next slide. Great, and Melina, over to you.
Okay, thank you so much, Rachel, and thank you so much for inviting me to present along with my colleague Amy. I'm delighted to be here. and just delighted to welcome such a diverse group of people from all over the globe and different types of educator roles. That's very exciting. So thank you for being here, and I loved hearing what your goals are for the session as well, and I hope that we can meet some of them very directly and others indirectly, and I hope that the interactivity of the session is stimulating, and that when you have opportunities to work in pairs or small groups, that'll be a chance to explore some of the themes that we touch on quickly a little bit more in depth. So I wanted to introduce myself in my professional role. I'm sitting at Cornell in Ithaca in my office today as well. And I work for the Center for Teaching Innovation, which supports the pedagogical needs of the university, including academic technologies and faculty development. And my role at the center, I'm an associate director, and my portfolio focuses pretty much exclusively on inclusive teaching. And so you can see here that I'm part of a large team, representing for my team today. But I wanted to share a little bit in my presentation who I am personally, in addition to who I am professionally, which is part of my own pedagogical practice. And so this is a slide that I created for a community engaged learning and teaching project that I received a staff grant for through our Office of Engagement Initiatives at Cornell. And I ran this program with a group of K-12 teachers in the Geneva City School District. And the purpose for that program was that I noticed that we had mostly white educators and a growing population of Spanish-speaking immigrants and Black people in our community, and there was a little bit of a lack of attention to anti-racist pedagogy. So I had a little bit of a critical mindset when I wrote the project, which was part of my learning. It made it harder for me to access what I could appreciate about what this group of educators was doing well. But I started that program with this slide. And so you can see here, I'm bicultural. I speak Spanish and English. My mom and her family is from Argentina, and I grew up partially in Uruguay. So those are the photos on the top right. Santa Fe, New Mexico was my other home. I'm a poet, and you can see my family, my wife and children down at the bottom. And then for this presentation, I added a couple of new slides, which are related to the work that I do in my community engaged work, which is as a member of the Finger Lakes Rapid Response Team. A group of us has started a grassroots organization to work directly with our undocumented immigrant population. And so some of the learning that I'm bringing into the session today comes from that work and the challenges that I've faced in doing that work and trying to bridge it into my role as an educator at Cornell, and collaborating with Cornell students and basically experiencing learning environments that are outside of the classroom. So I wanted to offer we will share some the slides and a folder of materials for you to access this. And so this is, in case you ever wanted to do an activity like this with your students, it's relatively common. Some of you might be familiar with it already or use it in your own teaching already. But the exercise is simply to ask people to do some free writing. I am from, and then you start with places. You list the places that have been important to who you are, and the food that makes up who you are, your food traditions, and the people who have been important to you. And then from that, you either have a poem or a free write or a collage. I chose to do my I am from piece as a collage. And the way that this worked in our program was that it helped us all see each other beyond who we just were as educators. We got to share a little bit about our backgrounds. And then the image that I'm showing here is in our Johnson Museum collection, and I thought it was appropriate for our migration story. It's a refugee story quilt from the Hmong people in Laos, and helps to evoke this idea of journeying and migration. Okay, with that said, I will pass it over to Amy, and you can advance the slide, please. Let's see. I thought we had Amy's self-introduction here. Did I make a mistake? in the slide orders. Migrations Initiative, I don't know if it's possible to advance to the slides that are Amy's self-introduction slides.
Ascari, I think that is slide 23.
I think she wanted to start with slide 21.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Melina. And thanks to Rachel and the Migration Initiative at Einaudi Center, the team, for having me here today, and joining all of you today. And also thanks to all of you for signing on today for this conversation. And I'm looking forward to actually learning with you around reflective pedagogy. And so, as we all know, just my self-introduction, I also wanted to say that a lot of us can trace our own lineage to some of our scholarship and practice. And so a little bit about myself in terms of professionally, just like as Melina have done, I sit in the office of a new integrated office called David Einhorn Center for Community Engagement. If you can go to the next slide. And it's a center where it's recently merged as of July 1st. And so it has become a bigger team that is led by Ryan Lombardi and Catherine McGomez. And basically it's bringing the two offices and public service center, which I resided for 10 plus years, that bring in 35 plus years of experience in working in the work of service learning or community-based learning, community engagement, and along with officer engagement initiatives. And my role has shifted to more supporting the academic initiatives, so working with faculty, working with academic departments and offices in thinking about how does community engagement could be integrated and could be connected, and with the ethical partnership with off-campus community, locally and nationally, and also globally. My other set of portfolio is working around the global service learning and global engagement. And so that's where I'm situated. But with that, besides professionally, I'm also a student in the anthropology department, specifically anthropology of education. I just want to mention that because the scholarship really, and particularly my faculty mentor, and have really guided me and really helping me to think critically in my own practices. And we think about reflexivity, we talked about reflections. Reflection is also reflecting with our own work experience and with our own lived experience as well. And which you will hear a little bit more around some of the literature that we'll be citing and we'll be sharing with you later on as well. Thinking our own funds of knowledge that it's important in bringing into our work and also to our reflections. And and I just, if I may, I just want to say thank you to Dr. Sofia Villenas, who's the one who really guided me in then honoring me in the work that I do and bringing this incredible rich literature in helping to reflect critically on some of the work. So with that, in moving with that is bringing my own personal self to you and sharing with you about my migration story. And so as myself, I'm a mother of three, and you see a picture of my family, my immediate family, with my three children and also my partner. And I'm a first generation immigrant. I moved with my family when I was young. We moved I migrated from Taiwan and then to Dominican Republic, and then to the United States. So it's kind of migration path in the 1980s. And there's a longer story beyond that, but just sort of kind of share that migration really helped me sort of think about in terms of myself, how then do I bring in my own story, my own experience with my partner, who is a first generation refugee, who migrated with his family from Laos. and right after the Vietnam War, and then came to resettle here in Ithaca, New York. And now we're combining our stories, our own migration stories, in terms of how do we think about supporting our and raising in this inter-ethnic, intercultural family, and with the children three, what are we passing on to our families? What are we passing on to our children? Both of us are trilingual, and so a lot of time we will use those language as a advantage to ourselves, and but at the same time not so advantage. But however, ironically, our children became monolingual. They only speak English because of our own challenges in communication. But for thinking of that in terms of, but these are, I mentioned this about my family, it's because they are my everyday work, my everyday inspiration, and my everyday motivation in doing the work that I do, which connects also, I put in this picture of a dragon boating, and some of you are familiar with, and I'm passionate, and also one of the key members that introduced the Ithaca Tompkins greater community about dragon boating, which is about what they have taught me. It's a lot about community building and capacity building, and how does people come in as with everyone from different cultural, different experience, different paddling experience, and different athleticism, people all bring in their own sets of funds of knowledge into this boat. And then how they're all coming together, just like my family, how we bring in our own stories, our own experiences together on how we create community. And rather than looking at what's needed and what is being damaged, but looking at how we can bring in our funds of knowledge and our experience together to create a community of desire. So I want to share that migration story with you. If you can move to the next slide. It's my reason for doing so, as Melina have mentioned, it's the sharing about who we are. It's also a practice of way to connecting with students, and then recognizing that creating this mutual learning space together. And also at the same time, I want to honor and encourage our students to share their own lived experience and knowledge, because they bring in that source as their strength into that learning space. And also affirming the students' identities and their own stories. Like myself, who is as you can see, physically, and also I identify and then impose as Asian American. It's a minoritized community, minoritized groups in the United States context, and it's consistently racialized. And so I want to be able to bring those students to feel that they can also do the same thing. And then also contextualize the stories within the historical, social, political. So really asking students, how can we move a little bit beyond from our story and then tease out and interrogate, and also around the systems, the global social system that we all part of, and how that we use that story as a way to better go deeper into understanding the system, but also understanding ourselves and truly honoring ourselves. And so really encourage the students, encourage that critical interrogation of these global systems through some of these lenses of settler colonialism and racial capitalism and white supremacy, to help us think critically and also be reflectively in our own practices. So Rachel, should I turn it over to you?
Yeah, thanks so much, Amy and Melina, for your introductions. I'm going to pose 3 questions in the chat to everyone about what the kinds of introductions that Melina and Amy just provided, what they do as pedagogical tools for your classrooms. So just to reflect, you can answer these questions in the chat as well for the sake of time, and then also for the ability to look back at each other's answers. So the 3 questions are, what are some of the benefits you can see from this type of introductory activity, or this kind of approach to telling and sharing our stories? Second question is, what are some adjustments or inspiration you might take into your own work, ways that you might take up part of it, adjust it, evolve it? We'd love to hear your thoughts, which allow for continual adaptation. and whether you have any similar strategies that you want to share. So if you can answer those questions, go ahead and put them in the chat, and then we'll be able to kind of see each other's responses to those questions. Great. Oh, Audrey, I love that about creating a humanizing effect of the faculty and a connection with the students, right? That vulnerability. And Estelle is building trust and empathy between students and the teachers. Yes, Judy, it helps the students to see different levels on which they can connect with each other, right? So that connection between the students. Beautiful. Great. I think these are really helpful. Melina and Amy, anything you want to share about how you see the introductory stories? Ernesto has done something similar. Bringing your migration story into the classroom as well. Great. It's Shakira. It is humanizing, isn't it? Great. Okay, and you can keep putting them there. I think this is really wonderful to see how you all reflect. Melina, I'm going to turn it over to you to start. Askari, if you can share the slides again. There are 3 course modules, basically 3 component parts that we want to address today in terms of inclusive course design, thinking about course or module design. If it's just one component of a course, you can narrow in or go back. I think you became unmuted. Sorry.
So I can step in now, Rachel, if you're ready. Thank you, everybody, for posting your reflections in the chat. Those are really lovely. And if you have other good ideas, I would love to hear them. So keep your chats going. And so the way we've organized this is that I'm going to speak for a few minutes on these 3 things, and then we'll do an activity to practice a critical reflection strategy, and then I'll pass that over to Amy, and she'll talk for a few minutes, and then we'll have a chance to practice another strategy related to visual charting. So the 3 things I'm going to talk about just very briefly, and I hope it doesn't feel too much like a giant flyover, the tiny dots of ants. I hope that you are able to see what you might want to follow up on later. So if we could go to the next slide, that would be great. The next one after this. So I wanted to share this inclusive course design framework, which has been really useful to me in my practice. And I'm just going to briefly describe it and say why it's been useful. But I will say that when I see diagrams like this and spend a little bit of time thinking about them, I sometimes have this experience where it feels like I've been struck by a lightning bolt, like a light bulb just shines on, and it helps me organize and connect thinking that previously was a little bit scattered. And so I've always been drawn towards thinking about inclusive teaching. I was trained to teach writing workshops, UNH English background, sat my students in a circle, seminar style teaching. And my challenge was to learn how to lecture. Sometimes for other people, it's the other way around, but I still felt like having a chart like this helped me understand my role as the instructor. How do I think about who I am, where I come from, and how my students might be perceiving me? Where does my sense of authoritativeness come from? When I first started teaching, I really struggled to feel a sense of authority. I was young, I was a woman. I sometimes felt like my students looked pretty much like me. And then the next bubble is students. Who are your students? Who are Cornell students? Who are your institution students? Who are the students that you serve? And then who are the individual students in your class or program, and what are their learning needs? How do you find that information? how do you help reduce anonymity and help them build relationships with each other and with you. Then there's teaching methods on the right, which also is pedagogy, thinking about how you teach in relation to how people learn. And then curriculum is the stuff that you teach, the content. That's often dictated by you as a knowledge maker, but also by your disciplinary traditions and the long history and genealogy of thinkers in your discipline, and how all of these things work to create a learning environment and a set of group dynamics. One of the things I learned by looking at this framework is how much that sense of well-being and experience of belongingness relates to each of these other elements, and that I, in my role as the facilitator, I'm the one who's primarily responsible for facilitating that. It won't just happen by itself. Sometimes it might, but then it's just a lucky thing that happened. But there are so many things I can do, I've been learning to help facilitate that. And so over time, I've gained a greater commitment to creating a co-learning environment where I provide opportunities for students and learners to teach me, to share a little bit where they come from, to ask for open and honest feedback often, to check in to see anonymously how are students experiencing that learning space so that I can get a window into that. So this framework has also given me kind of buckets of where I can choose to work on my own self-development. Maybe I need to focus on my teaching strategies for a while. Maybe I need to, in terms of inclusion, is my course diverse in terms of the content? Who are the speakers and what kinds of examples am I using? What kind of content? It helps me understand how to revise my teaching. It's basically a map. So I hope that you find just having this as a base useful. I think it's helpful to connect all the other things too, because for me, inclusion is kind of the big umbrella under which each of these, the rest of our conversation falls. However, you will notice that on this framework, you don't have community engaged partners. So if you're thinking, or if in your teaching you work with another group or entity or organization that's outside of your classroom, it brings in a whole new layer of what to think about. And so one of the things that I wanted to say, and you can even go to the next slide, is that there is a learning curve that comes with working with community partners that reminds me basically the skills that I learned through intergroup dialogue are the skills that I'm applying when I work with my community partners. Dialoguing across difference, understanding that people's worldviews can be very different depending on their sociocultural material lives and where they've come from and their own migration stories. All of that influences what the partnership will look like. And so I just framed a few questions here because first of all, I thought many of you signing up for this workshop were in the thick of thinking about community partnerships. I'm not sure that that's true for everyone. So hopefully the general comments are helpful anyway, but you can go ahead and go to the next slide. And here is where I wanted to say that I wanted to list some of my influences and also just express gratitude, as Amy has done for our teachers. And Sophia Viennas has also been a teacher for me. And she was a guest in the program that I mentioned where we worked with K-12 teachers. So I had a chance to observe her teaching in action and drawing from this. And she shared with me at that time this concept of funds of knowledge, which came out of work that was done with Latino and Hispanic students at the border, understanding how immigrant families, how they hold knowledge in different ways, how they support their students and their families and households, how much information is there. And so this is something that became really important to me. Sort of, some of you may have heard also the term ways of knowing. And that's, all of these are phrases that you can look, if you get interested in them, you can look more into them. But that was a concept that I learned when I worked with Native people in Alaska. I was at the University of Alaska for a while, creating culturally responsive curriculum there. And so that was about working with people from cultural traditions that had an entirely separate worldview from a Western scientific-minded tradition. And yet they had science, they had observation tools, they had a cosmology that was something that was unfamiliar to me at first. Funds of knowledge is a little bit different because it's a way of respecting and valuing knowledge that happens in a micro group or micro community. And so this is something where I had an opportunity to work with a woman who had just arrived from Guatemala, and her first language turned out to be Mam, not Spanish. I had to Google it, but I was struck by, with an intensity of emotion, thinking about an indigenous migration coming in the other direction from the historical migration of 30,000 years ago, and what this means for my tiny Geneva town, the classrooms where my kids are sitting, her daughter who's in school, who streamed into school, and what it means to build community with and for, a just community with and for everybody who's a member of that community. So these are basically leads for future learning. And you can go ahead and go to the next slide. And then I just wanted to add that in my personal journey, I've developed a teaching philosophy, and I have some points of struggle and continuing learning. One is that I think humility, a stance of humility, is really important, but I also struggle with self-doubt. And so understanding the difference between those two and when to trust my intuition and knowledge and when to and how to value and empower others at the same time, it sometimes has felt a little bit like a paradox. The thing about role clarity is really important. For example, when am I a mom and a person in Geneva? When am I an educator leading a program? What's my relationship to the students at my university? What does it like when faculty are my students and the learners that I'm working with? And how do we share power in co-creating the programs that we're trying to make? But I always feel a tremendous amount of gratitude because of that co-learning positionality. I'm always learning, even from each of you today. So you can switch to the next slide. So I did want to say that Amy and I put together a box folder, which will share a link to everybody through the registration form. And I wanted to just highlight a couple of things there. It's so useful to see other people's examples. So Marcia Ames Sheevely shared with me and gave me permission to share with anybody who was interested in this. And all of the documents from a single course that she ran with community partners in Belize and in Ithaca. The course was focused on uses of traditional plants as medicine. And in particular, she made very good use of a critical reflection strategy called DEAL. And so you can see in her handouts there, she describes the entire model, and you can see how she uses it and values it and assesses critical reflection as part of her pedagogy. We also included in that folder rubrics, including a rubric for understanding how you're building your community partnership. Amy has written an article that she's drawing from that's also in the folder. And I wanted to share for those of you who are at Cornell and able to partake that both the Center for Teaching Innovation and the Einhorn Center provide consultations. And there's also a Community Engaged Learning and Teaching Institute that runs in May. For those of you who are not at Cornell, there is a course that runs for free on edX, and I'll type that in the chat when I'm not talking. It's called Teaching and Learning in the Diverse Classroom. So if you're interested in learning more about inclusive teaching, that one is open to everyone. Okay, and I think if you could go to the next slide. To wrap up, I wanted to talk a little bit about strategies for critical reflection. I think Ernesto, you had posted about wanting to know like the specifics about reflective pedagogy and how to do that. So hopefully that will be answered here. You can go ahead and click to the next slide. So there's, as Amy hinted at, there's a long tradition of building this pedagogy that has several branches on the tree. So there's this genealogy and that genealogy. You can also see critical reflection referred to as metacognition, and you can look up stuff on the science of the brain and how we learn and retain information. But basically, all of this stuff is basically trying to understand how we learn how to think. And then there's the additional stuff of what do emotions have to do with it? How does that help us learn how to think, etc. But Kolb's 1986 model, I thought, was a good baseline for anyone who's doing teaching outside of the classroom environment, because it's a description. He first starts with this description and then builds out a theory that's much more complex, but you can jump in at any point on this circle. People tend to have preferences for where they feel the most comfortable. But the idea is that you start with a concrete experience, doing or having an experience. You move into reflective observation, which is reviewing and reflecting on the experience. And that will sound familiar to those of you who are Dewey fans. And then you move into abstract conceptualization, which is the time when you start your analysis and thinking about things. And then you go back into active experimentation, having made changes to what you learned based on your reflection. So this describes a reflective process, which you could use this to build a tool for critical reflection, and some people have. Sergio, I see your hand up, and meanwhile, you can click to the next slide.
No, I'm sorry, I was missing.
Okay, so go ahead and click to the next slide. That was exciting for a second. I thought we had a live question. So in my trajectory as a learner, I've bumped into several tools for critical reflection and seen people make good use of them in different ways. So this one I like because it sort of comes from the, it was first introduced to me by David Greenwood, who's an anthropologist, who basically helped me understand from his disciplinary perspective how, we all have biases. You grow up in the atmosphere that you grew up in. In a sense, this shuts down your ability to even see aspects of difference. Unless you have a systematic approach for kind of checking your own assumptions, you tend to select the data that is most familiar, that you want to hear and see. We all have this bias. And so part of using a tool like this one is to break it down into steps and provide students a chance to each rung on the ladder. So this is a peel away that you can take with you. And then if you just go to the next slide, I wanted to share the most simple one that's the most difficult to forget. When somebody says, oh, what's a tool for critical reflection? I'm like, oh, how about what, so what, now what? And so I wanted to give you a chance to practice with this one a little bit. And so the way this one works is simply you have an experience and then you invite students to do some reflective writing and break it down into these three categories. And so the first category is to write, to describe what happened, what your observations are. So you'd think that this would be the easiest part, but it's very difficult to write observations without analysis, to basically just do a description. So that's a really wonderful practice, to just sit in the description seat for a little while before you move into the analysis, because right away, even when you hear people telling stories about experiences that they've had, you're like, but wait, describe what happened, because you want to be able to make your own informed decision about whether their interpretation is correct or not. So description, and then so what are the implications of that? How did you feel? Why was it complicated? Why was it naughty? What are the ramifications? What's the stuff that needs to be resolved? And then the third step is to think about next steps. What should we do now that we've reflected on this? What did you learn from doing the reflection? And so what I wanted to invite you to do, Rachel, if you still think that we have time for this activity, is to just think of a recent challenge that you faced related to other humans. So these happen all the time. It could be a miscommunication. It could just be a time where you were flooded by strong feelings. It could be an interpersonal situation, something that came up in a group that you happen to notice, and just spend some, maybe we can bump it down to 2 minutes, just spend some time trying the what, so what, now what. And then we'll put you in breakout rooms in pairs to just have a conversation. And so you can think about, you can talk about, would you use a strategy like this one, or maybe something else if that strategy worked for you. I'm not sure that it'll work because we're sort of in a hurry here, but I wanted you to taste it, because I often find that if I taste it and I like it, I'll be likely to use it. Otherwise, if I get just the description, I don't have that embodied experience of having tried something out. So just take a minute. I'll be quiet and let you write for 2 minutes. So do we have time to put people into pairs and small groups? Okay, Rachel says yes. So migrations initiative, I suggest take about 6 minutes. So that's 3 minutes to just share your thoughts with each other, make a connection with a colleague. Would you use this strategy? Is there another strategy that you have that you would prefer? Did it work? And then we'll hear back from you when you come back. So it seems like most people have gone to breakout rooms, but some people are still here. Does that mean you didn't get invitations to breakout rooms? Our phone folks maybe can't.
I think for Molly, because Eleanor and Beth are here, can we?
I don't think I got it. I want to get it anyway.
So Sergio, your audio is so bad, we can't really hear you. But this group could discuss with us. So those of you who are here in the room, is this a strategy you might use?
Hi all, I'm still here, but I have a newborn, so it can be a little challenging. I use something similar. I used to teach interpersonal communication while I was a grad student, and I used to ask students to share an intercultural experience at the beginning of the class. So I definitely see this as something I could use in my migration class as well as in any anthro course. It's super valuable.
Yeah, that sounds great. Thank you for sharing, Melina. And it's nice that you brought your newborn.
Thank you.
Would anybody else like to share? I think one of the benefits of having the structure is that it helps you focus your thinking. So there's another strategy that I really like that's a group-based strategy, which is keep, drop, create. So you have an experience or you put together a program and then you have a discussion with the stakeholders and decide what you want to keep, what worked well, what you want to jettison, and what you felt like you could, you wished you would have had or that you'd like to do differently next time. How about we have two people who have dialed in. Would either of you, the 832 number, like to share a thought? Or our 219 number?
Well, they may have been muted when we put everyone in breakout rooms. I don't know how that works.
It's okay, Mary. It's a little bit awkward because it's a slightly too large a group, but that's okay.
Yeah.
I think some people are in person with each other, so it seems like they're here, but they're not really here. Like I know.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
This is the 219 number. I rejoined, I think, right as people were being put in the breakout, so I may have missed the prompt.
Okay, all right. Welcome, Rick, and just to let you know where we're at, people are in breakout rooms having a brief discussion about reflecting on a reflection strategy that they just tried. It's the what, so what, now what strategy. The simplest sort of three-part framework to organize your thinking around being deliberate about critical reflection.
Great, thank you, Melina.
Would anybody else in this group like to share a thought? Rick, are you just joining the call or were you on earlier and got booted off somehow?
No, I'm just joining the call right now. So there was, I was not booted off earlier.
Well, welcome.
Thank you.
We will share a box folder that has links to the slides, and we basically demonstrated an introduction activity to just show how to introduce your whole self, and then just gave a couple of frameworks for inclusive course design. Where are you zooming in from?
I'm at the Einaudi Center, the Senior Associate Director, so I'm just probably down the hall from other people here at the office.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but just let you know we're closing the breakout rooms.
Thank you, Mary.
Yep. There's a timer, so it's 49 seconds. Learning all sorts of things about Zoom.
Welcome back. Hi, Ian. Welcome.
Hi, I'm just shifting from phone to video. Great to.
Oh, great. Thank you. Nice to see you. Did you introduce yourself earlier?
No, I didn't. I came on a little bit late and just got a Zoom link. But I teach at the law school in the clinical program.
Welcome. We have folks from all over today. Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back.
It's like we never left.
I like it. I like it, Judy. Thanks for bringing a laugh back to us.
Oh, because what happened, it switched us out just as I was getting ready to make this point.
Exactly. You need to, but you need to send me the name of the article, Judy.
Okay, I will.
Yes,
I will.
send it.
Send it to all of us.
Oh, sure.
Okay, so just to close this section, I think we're ready to move into our next activity, but if anybody feels that you'd like to share one thought before we move on to the next thing, was there something useful in that for you? Were your pairs useful, good ideas? I see some nods. Okay, good. I see some sign language for yes. Thank you, Mariah. Okay, I think we can show the PowerPoint and shift over to Amy. Thank you, everyone.
Great, thanks Melina, and thanks everybody. I'm glad that we were able to do the breakout room so people can get a chance to kind of reconnect with each other and sharing some great stories and also great articles and resources. So that's fantastic. So I want to just kind of alluded to, I don't know if that's a slide to start. I don't know if there's one. So I wanted to share with you a method as Melina was talking about critical reflections and inclusive teaching. And so if you can kind of use that, we thought that this might be a great example as a way to think about inclusive teaching and kind of come back to the question about where is the community in that process, in that circle or the axes, and where are they located? Are they co-learner, co-teaching, co-facilitator, or co-designer, or are they simply just providing a service, or you're doing a service for them? So those are the questions that to consider as you think about partnership, collaboration, and the work that you do with your community. So in this context, bringing a methods, and which also has methodology around it as well. It's based on the program that I co-lead and co-facilitate with Dr. Shorna Allred, who is a faculty member in the Department of Natural Resource and Global Development, and also Southeast Asian program. And the program, we've been doing this for, I think, close to 8 years or so, Global Citizenship Sustainability Program. That we, in the wintertime, we take a group of students with us to partner with the students in Malaysia. We have a partnership with universities, so actually 2 universities in Malaysia, particularly on the island of Borneo, the East Malaysia side. So if you can go to the next slide. And this is our partnership with the several different departments on Cornell side and also on Malaysia side, and also just how we all come together to work with indigenous communities. So we partner together and collaborate, and along with the 2 indigenous communities that we work with on the island of Borneo, they are the Penans in Longlamai, which is semi-nomadic group, and also Ibans, the headhunters, the warrior group that has been known historically, anthropologically. So that how we come together and work together and sort of figure out how can all of us benefit through this process. And so we employ community-based research methods, participatory action research as a way to really think about not only for students to learn and students to experience and students to witness what the process is like in conducting research in collaboration with community. And so as you just put yourself, and if you can go to the next slide, if you can travel with me all the way to Borneo, and so just can only do it through map at this moment, but it's just through to Borneo in this island right here. And Longlamai is the village with the Penans, the formerly nomadic, some of them are still semi-nomadic group, and the UCTS, which is one of the university in Malaysia we work with, is situated in Cebu, and UNIMAS, which is in Cochin. So just imagine here, and in Borneo, so it's a very multilingual place, and so then the main language is Bahasa Malay, and then English as well, depending also on your education level. But with Longlamai with the Penans, the mother tongue is Penang, which is the language that they use in the village. And unfortunately, and I'm really ashamed to say that I haven't really fully learned the language itself. So just imagine the language barriers. And then so we use English a lot. And we rely on our colleagues, UCTS and UNIMAS, along with some of the folks who are actually who are very fluent in English as well. So imagine that language and then connecting, communications, how do we thinking about how do we connect in a very different ways. So part of it, we go back to that personal introduction as a way, and then to sharing ourselves of who you are. And what I learned from Longlamai and from the villagers from the Penans was that they didn't just want to know who you are. They are trying to put you in the landscape, the way how they understand where you're located, if you would. So that's really important. That was something that I learned too, on a sense of like the importance of sharing something about yourselves, the sharing of your own identity and how you think, how you make meaning of yourself. So this is the framework that we use in our program, and it's a very collaborative approach. At least we strive toward that collaboration, but it's a lot of time we can another time thinking about how do we unpack the power dynamics, and especially coming from an Ivy League institution, Cornell University, a Western university, coming in to work with a Malaysian university and the indigenous community. So that has been a country that has been colonized by Great Britain. So that colonization, that history is also really important in our conversations. And so we talked about how do we build collaborative learning? How do we think about mutual learning? And how do we think about working together that's benefiting everyone, not just for our students who gave this amazing experience just to be able to travel abroad. And also we didn't want to make it to be a tourism-based type of research tourism-based type of program. So if you can go to the next slide. So what we had adopted and which was introduced to us is thinking about how to, it's visual charting. And so here's allowing me to introduce to a method that we use, and which is heavily used because visual is really critical. So a lot of it, if you think about, so the Penans and the nomadic tribe, where they're living, everything has been visual, based on the trees, the leaves, the branch, and these are all symbols and the way how they tell stories through these symbols. So visual charting has become the tool that we were able to find as a way for us to better connect. So if I may just share with you, thinking about this is so, and so we had our students practice visual charting. And so using an issue, a climate change, and for them to visualize whether some of the meanings and theories around it behind it. And then next to this, I don't know if you can see my arrows, the cursor, is a visual charting that I actually use with a different community partners in Malaysia, in Borneo. And that asked them to actually, could you map out your community, like kind of sort of mapping out, and part of it, I was getting lost where I was going. So it really helps with the direction. It's like, where's the grocery store and where's the convenience store and all of that. But the conversation with that is for them to highlight what's important to their community. So showcasing that. And then this other one, it was a reflective practice that we use with our community. So our community partners will actually draw some of the symbols that are important to them. So if you can see this right here, and the book and the handshake, these are symbols that they see. And this is how they like to see the research in terms of that we are all working together. That handshake, that means a lot. And then the instructions, actually that reflective process comes from our community, who are actually starting to, what I noticed is they start teaching once we start stepping back, and our community partners, the elders in the community, start talking and sharing stories through these visuals with our students. So if you can go to the next one. So just sort of summary, and then if you want to learn more specific in terms of how we carry out the visual charting, and the article that we have written has actually identified some of the methodology, and also the specific methods, like the process that actually how we did it. So it's all articulated in the article. And if you have questions or anything would like to chat more about the strategies that we use, or and we have used this in a different forms, please feel free to reach out to us, or I'm sure Dr. Ara will be happy to do so as well. So the visual mapping, just summary, it's just a way to share artifacts that encapsulate, that capture everyone's thinking and processing, and then also as a way to better communicate with each other. Not to mention, it was just simply fun. And because they love to laugh at my drawing, because it's like, I just can't draw it the way how they do it. Mine's always come out to be a stick figure. And so they were like, oh, you Americans, just get, and so it just allowed it, just imagine that emotion, the laughter, you just can't, you can remember that better, what they said and what they instruct. And that's how what our students and myself had taken back with us in doing this process. And then the importance is about inclusiveness. So everyone's teaching, everyone is learning, everyone is part of that process. And then so coming out as that sense of community, a sense of everyone is being respected through this process. And if you can go to the next slide. And I just want to share with you some of the pictures before some of the photos. So again, I'm really bad at drawing. And so photographs are a great way to also try to visualize that. So you can also, just like Melina did with some of the photographs that she has shared from I Am From, it's just another way to do that. So you can see how our elders, and this is a picture of our the elders in the Longnomai community, was actually sharing his stories with his son, who was doing the drawing. So it was an opportunity for him to pass down that stories and history of what it's like to live in the forest, growing up. And then also the others have also drawing as well. And so this is part of that process of then coming together. So what we did was we had the community draw their own Longnomai community. And if you can go to the next one, we also had the students do the same thing. And so the students were presenting what they have experienced and visualized, what they have seen in the Longnomai community. Again, I can't tell you how many laughters and then how misinterpretation that our students had from the visual cue. And then later on, we could combine the two together into one, which is what you see here, that students, this student, Kevin, has a marker right here. So as the community were instructing, I'm sorry, I couldn't show you the whole picture, but instructing, and he was adding on more and more and more to the pictures. So again, it's that inclusiveness, that practice of joining together, which come together into one beautiful community mapping of the Longmamai. So just sharing some of that with you. And if you can go to the next slide. And I just wanted to say that's kind of the end of the visual charting. So see if you have any questions, comments. I love to hear your feedback and thoughts because I think, again, this is all of our learning process. I'm sharing with you my own journey. And so, and also resources that here. So just want to mention on Canvas, there's an Engage Cornell resource that my colleague Amanda Whitman and Anna Partel has put together for around different engaged research, engaged learning, community partnership, critical reflections. Lots of great resources are available. So if you have the Cornell Net ID, you should be able to access that very easily. And for non-Cornell, you will have access to the box that Melina and I have put together. And also here's the link to various programs and grants awards that's through the Einhorn Center. And also please contact us. We also have a blog site and that's open to everyone, the Ripple Effect, so that you can sort of see some of the practices and some of the reflections around some of the community engaged learning happening on campus. And then of course, sign up for our mailing list. And if you can go to the next slide, if I may just promote one more if they get on, is that we do have a talk coming up and you're welcome to join us. That John Saltmarsh, who is one of the lead scholars around the field of community engaged learning, will be zooming in, or it will be remote. And so he's a professor of higher education and talk about the field of community engagement, how it has evolved throughout the times, and also thinking about how this engaged college strategy might look like. So it's something that you're interested in, and I will stop right there.
Thanks so much, Amy. That was fantastic. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go back to the same breakout rooms, hopefully, to do the same type of exercise where you can talk with your pairs and partners about how you might implement or think about implementing some of these strategies for community engagement, particularly visual mapping, whether that would work in a context that you're thinking about, strategies for getting partnerships started, depending on how far along they're developed. And we'll take just 5 minutes. We'll come back because we have some big picture questions we want to ask of you to wrap up in the next few minutes. So Askari, if you can send us back into the breakout rooms, that would be great. And we'll talk about implementation and adaptation of this model that Amy's just shared with us. Thank you.
So again, we have a small left behind group here. And I don't know how many of you are without a group, but we can still, Molly, are you still alone in your breakout room? I can see you here on this call. Oh, okay, welcome back. All right, so why don't you and me talk? I think it's you, me, and Beth, and the person on the telephone. So we have a, but I wanted to meet you and talk to you anyway.
I know, right? I'm sorry. I didn't mean to commandeer the everyone chat, but I thought maybe I wasn't the only one in a breakout room by myself, but it appears that I was maybe.
Maybe you were, but for some reason we have this little group that didn't get connected to breakout rooms before. So last time we just ran the discussion here.
Okay, great.
So do you want to share any impressions from the presentation or the visual charting? Is that relevant to, and also, is this really your first semester teaching?
First semester teaching a full course. I've done lecture, sort of one-off lectures here and there, but yes, definitely my first full course that I've taught. Yes.
That's so exciting. Congratulations. My first full semester teaching experience was terrifying. And my mentor at the time was like, you only have to have the first thing once, and then you'll have the experience.
That's what people keep telling me. Yes. No, it's wonderful. I love it, but it definitely emphasis on what people have been talking about, that learning together. There's a lot of learning from them as well. I'm not sure how much is actually being taught, but I am learning a lot.
Well, if you feel like you need any support, our center is here for that. So feel free to connect with the Center for Teaching Innovation.
I did do a kind of one-on-one consultation at the beginning, which was wonderful as I was kind of putting my syllabus together. But yeah, I would love to connect with you directly too, especially in the sort of context of migration. And there's a lot of people who've been very, very helpful to me, but all of this is, I'm just trying to gather as many resources as possible and sort of tools, exercises. So all of this is great.
Oh, great.
Think about.
It's good. I was saying earlier that there's another favorite tool for reflection that I enjoyed with the group, which is the keep, drop, create exercise. I don't know if you've ever seen that one, but you do a thing together, you run a program, and then you take your team or your students and you just create a giant whiteboard chart and do a brain dump on what are you going to keep, what are you going to drop, and what are you going to create for the next time around. And I found that strategy so useful that I ended up using it impromptu in other settings.
Now, would you tend to do that around one like particular sort of exercise in class, or would you use that as more of a sort of assessment at a certain point, like in a semester, whatever the case might be?
Well, so the first time we used it, it was as part of an assessment process that we were going through with a study abroad program. And we had made some tweaks. And so then we were analyzing, what worked, what didn't work, what was still left to do, and repeating this exercise with various stakeholders so that we could get different perspectives. But then I've ended up using it informally in other settings, including in my organizing work, where like we'll have a team of planners who plan an action or say something like that, and then we'll just get together and say, okay, our process is working, but it's not perfect. Like, let's do a keep, drop, create. I mean, now that's shifted more over to lessons learned kind of a thing. So how would it work? In the classroom, it would have to be, you try something and then you take a moment to reflect on it, and then you decide that you're going to rebuild a part of it.
Have an end.
They are experts in cutting us off.
Oh, welcome back. This is my favorite part of the workshop, is getting to hear Judy laughing when she comes into the big room.
We've been having good conversations, and this is the third meeting Ernesto and I have had today.
Excellent. Rachel, I think it's over to you now.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone. If you can put in the chat some of the things that you came up with there, would love to have a record of that. And we can share the chat too, because I think that these things are really useful for us to learn from. We were just talking about the ways in which we might have community engagement strategies, building on Amy's example, and some of the, Beth was just mentioning, if I can share a practice of doing oral histories of the activists that she works with. And it circles back to the self-introductions that we just began this workshop with, in terms of understanding where people are coming from, their own origin stories, and how it shapes what they do and what they perceive, and how that together can build a sense of shaping the group's priorities, or the, building up the shared sense of collaborative mission. So I think that was really kind of connecting the dots here. Before we end, we have just a few minutes, so just keep popping your things into the chat with your ideas of community engagement. And we have a different slide, Askari, if you can bring it up, in terms of a set of radical discussion questions that we might want to pose to you. And that is particularly thinking about how we can decenter our work, and how we can have a set of thanks, Beth, of ways of thinking about co-teaching and co-learning. Actually, maybe this is the slide, sorry. And so how you see your role and your community and your partner's role in strategies for shared reflections, how do we recognize stakeholders and the like? So I think one question I'm really interested in is kind of who has knowledge and who makes knowledge. How do you see different ways of knowing? So any answers or partial answers that you have to answer these questions, put them in the chat, but also just shout them out. We don't have to take time to raise hands or anything, but anyone can just share your thoughts as well here in terms of what kinds of strategies you have and how you access knowledge, both with community partners and students, and how you think about supporting dialogue across differences. Anyone have something they want to share? And we can start with the first one in terms of how you see your own role, for example, in facilitating, co-facilitating meaning making or reciprocity or power sharing. Any ideas or strategies for that question? Yeah, go ahead. Eleanor's going to share something. I'm going to mute.
I'll just, if nobody else is raising a hand, I'll just start. One of the things Ernesto and I came away with is that this will really help us in establishing our relationship with our collaborators. And our project actually involves working with high school teachers in New York City at Medgar Evers High School. And it's a high school that has a large number of Caribbean students who, if they're not migrants, definitely their parents migrated here. And so all of these strategies just seem so helpful, because we do want to think about the whole exercise as a collaboration, and not just us telling them how to do Caribbean studies or assuming that we know best how to work with high school students, or that we are in this, one-way direction of knowledge production. It's about us being truly collaborators, where things that we learn from this engagement with them can also come back and inform what we are doing in our classes here. The other thing that, just in passing, this whole thing has reminded me so much of Pedagogy of the Oppressed, and I'm really enjoying this.
Judy, you're amazing. Thank you for sharing that. I'm going to pass my computer over to Eleanor too, who had a reflection.
Sorry, just realized that no one can hear me when I unmute on my own laptop. I'll be really quick. I was just going to say, I love hearing all of these reflections from other folks. And I was thinking about how even at the beginning of the term in the classroom space, when we present the syllabus or a plan, making that also a kind of narrative about why we chose particular texts and sort of making those choices explicit, I think can also open that up as a dialogue.
Great. Those are really helpful. So along with the resources in the box folder and some of the links we've shared here and the slides themselves, we'll also have a record of the chat that we'll put in the box folder, because I think some of your reflections are really instructive themselves. So thank you all so much for your engaged learning and collaboration. A huge thanks to Melina and Amy for preparing and all of your thoughtfulness in your knowledge and sharing it with us in a way that is really, I think, useful. And thanks to everyone who signed on and joined us virtually from everywhere around the world and right next door. So this was really wonderful. We'll be in touch via email to all those who've registered, and please keep us informed on what more you'd like to hear about. Take care, everyone. Be well.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Rachel.
Thank you to all of you.
Thank you so much, Melina and Amy and all.
Thank you.